on the rod. There's nothing keeping me up, and this is perfectly comfortable for me. As you can see, I'm letting all of my body weight go back on this harness. It leaves my arms free to do whatever I want to do with my arms, and I'm not using my back at all. All the pressure is on my thighs and on my calves. Everything is on my legs. And I'm going to say that's probably the strongest part of most people. That's why if you have the proper harness, you have it set up correctly, you can't go wrong by having a perfect setup harness. Another thing you want to keep in mind, when you're in a harness like this, there's definitely a method of fighting a fish with the harness. If you don't get this proper method down, and it's really simple, but if you don't get it down, you're not going to effectively use the harness, and it's not going to do all that much good for you. It can beat you up just as much as the fish can. So, some things we like to tell people. You load up, your fish is straight up and down and making circles. This is the majority of the time you're going to actually be in your harness. Your fish is in circles, and you can see his tail beat on the end of your rod. Okay, you're pulling on the fish normal. The main thing you want to do is keep your left hand on the reel. You can almost give yourself more drag with your left hand. You keep your left hand on the spool, and you get a feel for it, and you can feel the amount of pressure you're putting on this fish. You don't even have to use your drag. A lot of times when you're straight up and down, you're fishing heavier gear like 100 to 125 or 130 pound line, you can go all the way up into full at this point. When the fish is straight up and down at color, you can go all the way up into full. And a lot of times with this heavier gear, the fish can still take drag. Just with that little extra tail beat, that little bit of weight that's down there, the fish is going to be able to take drag even in full. So keep in mind, the best thing to do when you're in a harness is to keep your hand on your reel like this. And when you start getting those little lifts, the fish, you watch your rod tip. You want to watch your rod tip through the whole thing. You start getting your rod tip, you see your rod tip start to come up, fish goes on the circle, starts to come up, then you snap a quick wind back down and hold the spool. Don't let him take that little bit. Every little bit you get in low gear, you want to keep at this point. You can put so much pressure on this fish you wouldn't believe. So what you want to do, keep in mind, you start lifting, holding onto the spool, watch that rod tip, you're seeing the tail beat. As soon as it starts to come up, then you snap a quick wind down and come right back up with it again. Watch that rod tip. At this point, you can have an amazing amount of pressure on him with 100-pound line, the type of gear we're talking about. Fish starts coming down, then you can just drop your rod tip with him and feel it. You don't have to give him line off your reel. You can just drop your rod tip and then sort of feather him back up. Lift, watch that rod tip. As soon as it starts to come up, then you drop one wind like that. Watch that rod tip, drop another wind. And then sometimes you just can't get a wind. Sometimes he'll just start taking you back down, and that's when you can just follow him back down. But you don't have to give up line on your reel. That's why we like to see people with their hand on their spool. You just get a better feel of what's going on with the fight. You get a better feel of what the fish is doing and how much pressure you can actually put on the fish. The biggest mistake I see people doing when they're strapped in like this, they're in their harness, they're still trying to use their arms, and if these straps are loose, they're not doing a darn thing for you. If you're pulling on your fish like this and you're in your harness, you're not doing anything. That's why let the harness do the work and get the feel of the fish with your left hand on the spool. Once again, it's really important. Watch that rod tip. Second the rod tip starts to come up, then you drop a wind. And once again, you got to remember at this point, you're always in low gear. At this point, you're always in low gear. Another thing you want to think about as far as harnesses go, a big misconception a lot of people have is when the second they hook a fish, they think they need to get right in their harness right away. They think they need, as soon as they hook a fish, they're on one of these long trips, they think, oh boy, I got a big one. They got to get right in their harness. That's the worst thing you can possibly do. I'd say the first few minutes of a fight, the most important thing to do is to stay out of your harness, let the fish settle down, let the fish run, do whatever it's going to do. Then you can go ahead and put the rod in your pad. You can put your rod in your butt belt and settle in. Once the fish settles down, get straight up and down, then you go ahead and get strapped in. And just about every time there'll be a crew member or two with you. If you got a big one, we're going to be there with you, coaching you every step of the way. So it's really important to keep in mind when you hook a fish, don't try to get strapped in your harness right away. That's the biggest mistake you can make. Stay out of your harness, let the fish settle down, then we'll get you strapped in your harness and you can go to work on them. One other really important thing we need to touch on these harnesses is the placement of the pad and the placement of the actual bucket harness itself. A lot of people I see out on trips, they try to wear their harnesses up a little bit too high, sort of like a kidney harness. If you'll notice, this harness I have on me right now, it's actually below my belt, and it's down all the way around almost to my thighs. So the most important thing is to have it low. Like I said, it's below my belt. You keep it low like this and it won't tend to slide up. If you don't have it low enough, it can tend to slide up onto your back, then it's doing you no good at all. So keep in mind, you have it low. It's almost like you're sitting on a bench. You're not using your back at all, like I said. It's almost like you're sitting on a bench. You have the harness low. You have the straps here set correctly, and the harness will work for you. The harness will do most of the work. But the most important thing is to keep that thing low and keep the pad low.
But sometimes, no matter how much help you have, these fish are going to